One of the many reasons why WatchMojo became this massive pop culture phenomenon is because they didn't put VH1 and MTV's content on, the platform YouTube, and we filled that void.
This is where it all begins, so say goodbye to all your fears, all your doubts. This is where they die. This is where we come to win, we come to fly. This is where we make our dreams come to life. Welcome to Innovation City.
Welcome to Innovation City, a podcast featuring innovators, disruptors, and creators who are breaking through the status quo to change the way business happens today. My name is Michael Johnson. I'm here with my co-host, Tyler Kelly, and we are at Venture Cafe Miami tonight, and we are here with Ashkan Karbasfrooshan. Hopefully I pronounced the 4 syllables correctly.
You nailed it. I'm very happy. Mission accomplished.
That's amazing. So Ashkan, when I look at this bio, I'm just amazed because as the people that listen to the show know, Slam loves content, and Ashkan is like a content godfather. Essentially, that's what it boils down to. He's got a track record of launching, building, and scaling content companies with advertising supported models. You sold a previous company to News Corp, and your existing company, WatchMojo, you bootstrapped it to profitability in the online video market. And right now, it's the 10th largest YouTube channel globally. It has, just on YouTube, about 12 or 13 billion views and over 16, 17 million subscribers. And that's just the tip of the iceberg because you're doing a lot of other things like in video platforms and things like that as well. You've written 3 books, and this most recent book, The 10-Year Overnight Success, which as an entrepreneur, it's like, duh, right? An entrepreneurship's manifesto, how WatchMojo built the most successful media brand on YouTube. I can't wait to read that book. And so for those of you guys that don't know, WatchMojo.com is the place to go see all this content. And you're just blowing up, essentially with top 10 list on people, places, trends that shape pop culture, and biographies, profiles, all that cool stuff. Tell me where you got the idea to do all this stuff.
In 2005, my old company was acquired first by IGN Entertainment and then subsequently by News Corp, and it was a men's online magazine. I was very lucky to be part of a great team. We all wore many hats. It was called AskMen. It was like a Maxim GQ style, publisher of men's lifestyle content online. I thought that had a lot more runway, but my partners, they had founded the company. I joined 5 months after. They wanted to exit and get out, and I could respect that. So we all wore many hats. I was a columnist, a resident spokesperson, interviewer, and the VP of ad sales. Over a 5-year period, I probably wrote 1,000 articles. Wow. I interviewed a couple hundred newsmakers like Joe Montana, Hugh Hefner, lots of great, fascinating people. When 2005, I got married. I was 27, and I said, you know what? We just got married. I have a little bit of money from the exit, saved a little bit of money from running ad sales. Now's the time. There's no ideal time to take that kind of risk. You go to bed at night, you're like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to take the risk. You wake up in the morning, it's cold. You don't want to get out of bed, let alone go take on the world. But my wife and I felt like, we just got married. We're in Montreal. We don't have kids yet. Why not? Let's roll the dice. There's some very big vision kind of components, but there's also some very practical, realistic realities. So I had a non-competition agreement where I could not do a men's online magazine. And I also didn't want to reinvent the wheel. I felt, look, there's other publications out there that are masters of publishing articles. They've mastered the text format. I was not a videographer. I was not a video editor. But I could see, as a storyteller, that was the challenge I wanted to embark on. I wanted to be able to take what I had learned over the years. I like to speak. I like to listen. I like to exchange ideas. I like to take, even my first book, which was geared towards young professionals and students, I kind of had all these themes, the principle of specialization, the Gestalt psychology, the principle of yin yang. I like to package things. So we decided, to launch WatchMojo, and the statement of purpose was here to serve. The vision, which doesn't change and is why we do what we do, and that was to inform and entertain. And the mission, which is what does change depending on what's happening in the backdrop, and it's how you accomplish your vision, if we were to get out the MBA lingo, well, that was with a video on every topic. So we started off building this big house. We weren't looking for that viral hit. At the time, everybody was looking for a viral video, and I said, you can't capture that that lightning in a bottle. Something becomes viral usually because it was so unforeseen and random. And I know like you guys may appreciate this in the ad agency and marketing world, you'll sometimes have a client that's like, let's create something that becomes a hit. And you're like, yeah, this meeting's over. It doesn't work like that. But so I wanted to build something sustainable. So we started off with like a video, and it could be literally on the planets, a video on, random trends, profiles of destinations. And we were very horizontal. So we had travel clips, we had fashion tips, we had cooking videos, recipes, how-tos. We had historical videos. We literally were kind of like not user-generated like Wikipedia, but like a video on every topic. And the videos in 2006 were actually of great quality for that era because we were competing with user-generated content of a grainy dog on a skateboard. But when I look back, I cringe because I'm like, oh my God, and it's improved. But over the years, we kept improving, and we were kind of a leading best practice, like leading example of what video programming built for a first internet generation and then even mobile audience looked like. And we start off becoming a bit more vertical and focused. Once we had all the how-tos and the trends and all that, then we'd start doing a lot of interviews, because especially up in Montreal, before they blew up, when Lady Gaga or Justin Bieber rolled into town, they would interview with the leading, newspaper, the leading radio station, the leading TV channel, and we were the crazies of digital media running around recording interviews. So after the interviews, we started to establish a rapport with the rights holders, be it record labels and movie studios and video game publishers. And we said, look, we'd like to do biographies of your artists, profiles of these organizations, profiles of these groups. And then in the back of my mind, we were also doing top 10 lists from day one. I love top 10 lists. I don't get me wrong, I could write an essay, any day of the week and twice on Sundays, but we were starting to be in a world where people had very narrow attention spans, short attention spans, and ultimately a list just distilled the argument and distilled the information. Like the example I use is I will probably not watch Beyonce's biography, no disrespect to her, but I would absolutely watch a top 10 Beyonce song because I'm like, what are her top songs? So we were always doing top 10 lists in the background. We didn't want to just be the top 10 guys. But once we covered all the A-list and B-list and C-list musicians and actors, and now this is around 2012, we just said, okay, now the timing is right. Let's just focus on top 10 lists, which we did. And the rest, as they say, is history.
So through that process, it sounds like you started, like you said, very, very broad. And was that intentional just to see what sticks, or was it to kind of find your footing or what you were best at, or tell me about that thought process?
Sure. So yeah, first of all, I think, success is many things, but it's three things. It's relative, fluid, and subjective, right? And so to me, I was like, success in as an entrepreneur, I think actually boils down to 6, maybe 7 things. One is vision, one is ambition, one is execution, one is persistence. The other one is luck and timing, and most entrepreneurs underestimate luck and timing. That's why they think they got the Midas touch, and that's why they usually have a success and the next one isn't a success, because they underestimate how hard it is. The 7th one, which I say, if and only if you figure out the right formula, is focus. To me, in 2006, we were focused on video. We were mastering our art. We were like figuring out, okay, is this a video or is this an article? If it's an article, we're not going to touch it. But meaning we're not going to spend 8 days doing something that is so timely that after 5 minutes it's irrelevant, i.e. news. But when it's the inauguration, we would produce the history of inaugurations. What the hell happens at an inauguration? And less about we're going down to DC and filming the inauguration. Let CNN do that. Let Fox News do that. We're going to do our own take on it. But so in my view, it was absolutely we were focused. But yes, the reason why we were horizontal was because, as a student of history, as a student of media, and as a student of business companies, I said, look, there's no way we're going to be number 1 in health overnight. If you're not number 1 or number 2 in any industry, to quote Jack Welch of GE, get out of that industry. So I was like, there's no way we're going to out WebMD in health. There's no way we're going to out Expedia in travel. But I felt if we could kind of like a Trojan horse say, Expedia doesn't care about videos, WebMD is so baked into articles, nobody in their right mind is going to deficit finance videos because the market wasn't there. So we were like the crazies up in Montreal that said, you know what, we're going to deficit finance these videos and just focus on videos. So we will produce video games and we'll license them to IGN. We'll produce fashion and beauty and license them to, Glam or Vogue. I mean, Vogue isn't going to take our videos because Vogue is Condé Nast and, they have a certain definition of quality, but there'll be takers for this.
Yeah.
And through that process, we'll get data across the web. It won't be like we're in the trenches being like betting the farm on health. We'll figure out where it makes sense. So to me, in hindsight, I would have thought we are focused, but absolutely looking back, I'm like, yeah, we were kind of broad. It was kind of ridiculous how wide we were. What happened was, I remember vividly around 2010, 2011, 2012, I have a great network, more American than Canadian. It's just almost by coincidence that I'm based in Montreal. When I'd go down to New York, I would meet, for example, Shane Smith, who is the founder of Vice. Also, just by coincidence, a fellow Montrealer. They were in Brooklyn. And he was like, you know what? He was like, I'm impressed with what you've built, but he's like, it doesn't make sense to me. You got to be more focused. And I was like, you're absolutely right. And I explained to him the reason, saying, we are casting a wide net to have as many partnerships. We're trying to build as many bridges onto this island to stabilize. And then we'll figure out, okay, this is the real bridge. All these other things were just, ropes that got us onto the island. And eventually the market had to catch up to us. I think it's important to be 1 step or 2 step ahead of a market. But if you're 8 steps ahead of a market, you're Friendster. You're way too early. Nobody is into social networking. So in our case, on the one hand, I think it's relative. Like I would have said, we are kind of focused. But it was also, well, let's just be horizontal to kind of figure out, there may be like, everybody always pretends everything was by design. There's a lot of luck and timing and lucky bounces that you're like, oh my God, I discovered something. Like most inventions, like beer, milk, all that stuff. Nobody woke up and said, I'm going to take water and come up with this amazing beverage that at 5% on average is going to get me tipsy and I'm going to love. It was kind of like, oh, look, we left this out. Months later, this doesn't kill us. Let's do this. Let's do this again. And let's try to do this with everything else, So I think entrepreneurs got to be honest with themselves to talk about the luck and the surprises. We ended up, for our travel videos, saying, okay, we're not going to rent a helicopter and fly around Miami, and because that's not really cost effective. But I'm like, if you have a lot of venture funding, you have like, 2 tables. On the left, you have problems. And on the right, you want to have your solutions. If you have a lot of money in a war chest, your first reaction is let's throw money at it. Let's hire that helicopter, fly around Miami to film this footage and B-roll. But if you don't have money, and then you realize that's not really a solution because you spend $8,000 for like half a day and you don't have that much and there's already good things out there. So by virtue of bootstrapping and being like, hustling, but not hustling in a crooked sense, just hustling like keep your feet moving, we're like, wait a second, let's just contact the Department of Tourism or like the Chamber of Commerce of Florida. Maybe they have some footage that is fully cleared, rights cleared that we could use. And lo and behold, we're like, oh my God, we got our hands on B-roll. It didn't cost us a fortune and we could use it for this, right? So when we did that, we're like, wait a second, we're going and interviewing Lady Gaga. They sent us an electronic press kit, an EPK. Why don't we ask them if we could use more of it and build the relationship? So the tips and tricks that we learned in one vertical absolutely helped us in another. We'd have conversations like with Getty and we're like, hey, do you guys want stock? Like we're doing cooking videos. Yeah. They're like, okay, but we need you to chop onions at this angle with this equipment and we need it in 7 different angles. We're like, yeah, no, that's going to take too long. So I think as an entrepreneur, whatever space you're in, you can't pivot 10 times in a year because you do nothing. But you do have to experiment, and you can kind of stick to your game plan because your game plan was kind of half-baked and you kind of had this vague idea. And, that's kind of what I say, the difference between vision with a capital V and vision with a lowercase v. The capital vision is what, as an entrepreneur, you see broadly as a marketplace. The lowercase vision is literally, it's murky, it's dark, you don't know what's happening in the industry because it's nascent. And sometimes you got to kind of like lean on capital letter V to make up for the fact that you don't have a lot of visibility, lowercase vision, in an industry. So that was kind of the thinking, right? It was kind of purposely horizontal, but we knew that eventually we'd have to narrow it.
That's an interesting take too, because I think what I hear you saying is you talk about those. It's 7 characteristics.
Yep.
And you have control over all of them except for luck, and maybe 50% of timing, or maybe so like you leverage everything you have control of so that you can.
Well, you got to put yourself in a position to succeed, right? I mean, it's not a coincidence that like WatchMojo's editorial is kind of like in the middle of a quadrant that is like encyclopedia-like, magazine editorial tone, cable TV look and feel. Like our travel clips used to feel like Travel Channel. You know, our music countdowns are basically VH1. You know, for this generation, and so it's not a coincidence that you know I said we're going to build an editorial that's to our strengths and passion points. So that's why, yes, you could leverage your vision, and if you have drive and your persistence, because you know you're going to, like, you know, the saying, even a broken clock is right 2 times a day. I kind of knew that it wasn't like out of vanity that I was like kind of going into debt and doing this. I could see, well, the world is going towards video. I could look at the overall data on YouTube and be like, my God, this is a platform that is boundaryless and is not even started to slow down. It's different. I think the mistake a lot of just people, not just entrepreneurs, even executives, is like you could be in the print industry now and you could kind of convince yourself, hey man, it's all good. Print is going to come back. I got news for you. It probably isn't going to come back. But if you kind of are trying to convince yourself, there's no amount of vision. Well, first of all, your vision may be off and there's no amount of execution. It's kind of like you could practice as a guitarist every day, but if you're not doing the right thing, you're just getting worse, in fact, right? So I think there is an element of being, you know, humble enough and not being too hard-headed that you do also say, okay, I've been going down this path at 47 degrees, but it's probably not going to get me to where I want to go. I need to maybe tilt a little bit and talk to others and ask others, you know. So yeah, I would say you're right that you control a lot of those variables, but I think to have the right kind of direction to then go at the right velocity, you do need to kind of take a step back and see what's happening in the industry and the world, you know?
So along those lines, YouTube, love it or hate it?
I love it. I think, first of all, yes, right now in 2018, we are biased in that YouTube is you know, makes a lot of money off of our channel. They send us a nice, you know, revenue each month, and we are, you know, basically a YouTube-based platform. But chicken or egg, it's because I always believed in YouTube as a platform that I bet the farm on YouTube. Fundamentally, YouTube is criticized for a lot of things and nothing is perfect. But even if you go back to the acquisition that Google made in 2006 for $1.65 billion, Google had a DNA of revenue sharing when it had AdSense, and it encouraged publishers to take that and put it on their websites. And if you clicked on it, Google would send you the publisher money. So their DNA already is very unique in that they believe in sharing the loot. That's one. Two, Google's entire mantra is, hey, come to our website or search this box on other people's website, and then we're going to give you a bunch of great results. And you could argue that it's a black box. You could definitely, like, they're not perfect. But our mantra is we're going to send traffic away. And by sending people away, which near term makes zero sense for us, we believe we're going to get people back. I don't want to knock Facebook. I think, to Mark Zuckerberg's credit, he's built an unbelievable platform where the entire world, like 2 billion people who are online, are on it, who he's convinced media companies and advertisers to pay him. Why would he change that? But that DNA of a private, closed, walled garden was never going to be a lucrative one for content creators. So like a few years ago, I had a lot of very smart people being like, why are you not aggressively on Facebook? I was like, Facebook is kind of like a content discovery, audience extension play. It's not really a monetization commercial platform. I think we need to be there, and when there is audience, the money will flow. But I was like, I'm not going to bet the farm on Facebook. Thankfully, because companies who bet the farm on Facebook 2017 shut down. Little things shut down. BuzzFeed didn't hit its revenue. All these companies, they leaned in a bit too much on Facebook. So YouTube is amazing because I feel their original DNA. And two, YouTube, especially under Google, actually figured out the copyright piece quite quickly. They also figured out the technology quite quickly. They figured out the monetization. And they were very astute, where a lot of people were frustrated when, for example, with TrueView, they had the skip ad option. A lot of people over the years were like, oh my God, it's not even, hey, hit in here, like, if you want to skip the ad. It's like a call to action, skip ad. But I was like, that's genius, because they are basically going to tell advertisers, there's no need for you to go elsewhere. We got the audience, we got the supply. You'll only pay if somebody watches it. Yes, near term, it's a scorched earth policy, but in the end, it's going to create a very good platform for users. And if there's a good user experience, over time, it'll become better. So is YouTube perfect? No. Are there times that I send them communications in private saying, hey, I don't understand this, I disagree with this? Absolutely. But unlike others, I don't go out there and record a vlog and bash them and then wonder why they're unhappy and don't return my calls. we do it in a professional manner. But I think overall, YouTube is a fantastic platform. And frankly, I think companies like Viacom shot themselves in the foot and caused themselves irreparable harm. You know, Viacom, when it sued YouTube for $1 billion, and in the end, the parties just walked their separate way. Nobody won, nobody lost, meaning Viacom lost because their goal was to, sue YouTube into oblivion. But I feel that Viacom sued, ironically, YouTube, saying YouTube caused it irreparable harm. But Viacom caused itself irreparable harm by sitting out and not putting their videos. It's not mainly, but one of the many reasons why WatchMojo became this massive pop culture phenomenon is because they didn't put VH1 and MTV's content on the platform YouTube, and we filled that void. So YouTube is fantastic, not just because I'm biased, but like just as a student of history, I feel in some ways that YouTube is more dominant in video than Google is in search. And then some people say, well, what about Netflix? I'm like, well, what about Netflix? Netflix is more traditional TV that's just delivered through the internet. It's not really the same thing as YouTube, which is basically a platform, AVOD, advertising video on demand, that is just, you got every piece of content imaginable, more or less. And the irony is, if a content is not there, it's at the detriment of that content. There's this entire generation of 10 to 30-year-olds who grew up not really knowing or caring about a lot of shows that were on TV that weren't on it. And I feel that's why you have all these YouTubers and creators. And like when you're at VidCon, which by the way, VidCon is like the mecca of YouTube, which Viacom bought in an effort to catch up and make up for lost time. But when you're at VidCon, the celebrities are not the Lady Gagas, it's the YouTube creators.
So in the intro to your book, your most recent book, you talk about a moment where like the copyright, YouTube had the copyright on music. Yep. And they started like shutting down those videos, and eventually they shut down the channel.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't shut down the channel. What happened, and yeah, we decided to open it there. I was literally before Christmas with my two daughters, and it was 2013. I had just met the YouTube brass in Toronto. They were like, great channel, you've done such an amazing job. They're like, you're going to be, at the time we had just crossed 1 million subscribers. They're like, in a year you'll be at 8 million. I was just, wow, blessed. So flattered. I was like, warm feelings despite the cold Toronto winter. I'd gone down to Toronto to meet them. And 8 days later, the channel went down for 21 hours. Now, in all fairness, here's what happened. Earlier in the week, they updated their copyright parameters. It's like their aversion to pain, their risk threshold. Nothing to do with us. We, by then, had really good rapport with the rights holders, the record labels, the movie studios, who were kind of like, we would pay you guys to do what you do. But within those organizations, they either have very junior people who sometimes are looking for actual copyright infringement, or they will hire these firms in Malaysia and Indonesia and wherever to kind of track people who are literally just taking full episodes and full songs. So we were kind of caught in the crossfire where those updated parameters, it's kind of like a fisherman's net. Mm-hmm. If all of a sudden you're saying, hey, we want to block more, we want to add more restrictions, even though even though legally we could do what we do, we don't rely just only on fair use and the law. We also base our business on the relationships we have and mainly common sense. So we were kind of already had these discussions. I mean, we'd been around for 6-7 years. We'd had these battles and we won, so to speak, and they all even, explicitly approved, implicitly supported, or reluctantly accepted our position. But these updated thresholds triggered really just a couple of videos. We reached out to the rights holders and they said, yeah, this is fine. You should not have been triggered. We release it. What we found out, devil's in the details, is YouTube has to manually process the retractions, because when you upload something which is actually infringing on copyright, and let's say Sony comes along and says, this is infringing my copyright, it is kind of weird, but it's guilty until proven innocent, because YouTube wants to limit its exposure in the event there is actual copyright. That's not the way the law works. The law says, Sony, take them to court, and then if you prevail, then discuss what damages, if any. But because YouTube is less about reflecting the law, and this is normal, they're a business, they're reflecting what their threshold is, they take it down right away. But when Sony says, yeah, this was not copyright infringement, YouTube manually makes sure this is not an error, and they put the video back up. But because they were slow in manually processing the retractions, we ended up going down. And I emailed our contact going, look, I don't want to go public and say you guys effed up, but what on earth is this all about? Our channel's down, we look like criminals. And we didn't want to ask for special favors to say, fix this, but we're like, we clearly didn't do anything wrong. Now, the reason this is 5 years ago, water under the bridge, it made us stronger, it made us smarter. The reason why publicly we didn't, I mean, this is the first time I'm expanding a bit more on it, but anybody could read between the lines, is YouTube is still a business. You know, sometimes when YouTube does a decision, people are like, censorship, man. I'm like, no. Censorship is the government can come and throw you in jail because you said this guy's a doofus or that, you know, this guy's a rock star. But a private or a publicly traded organization can kind of determine what they want to do. That's not censorship. That's a business decision. Here, we always understood that YouTube had a very unique history because of their own friction with Viacom and NBC Universal and others. So when it came to the area of fair use, they wanted to come across as Switzerland. So we kind of said, look, they made a business decision to adjust their thresholds. We got caught in the crossfire. If you're going to live by the sword and be super happy that YouTube gives you this awesome platform, like if you're going to be exposed to fair use, then I, as an entrepreneur, I don't want to be that guy who only complains and doesn't realize that, you know, if you're going to fly too close to the sun, you might get burned. Thankfully, because we were not in the wrong, and because I think they realized, this is pure speculation, I think because they realized that inadvertently, by us going down without a legal like trial, we just went down like guilty until proven innocent, I think they probably realized, and this is just pure guess, that they were causing us harm. And if some lawyer opportunistic would have come to us and said, hey, YouTube's aggressive, you know, copyright decision hurt your business, why don't you send them a lawyer's letter? Now, I would never be crazy to do that, but some entrepreneurs and executives who always look for scapegoats could have said, yeah, man, YouTube screwed us. So we kind of just were waiting, but then when the channel came up, it kind of just confirmed again that a couple things, okay, what we do is legit and legal, but we have to be careful. It's a business built on YouTube, so let's find out, instead of blaming them, let's have a communication and, you know, rapport with them to say, explain to us, how does your system work? Instead of just being in the dark. And that was the lesson for us. Our lesson was, hey, you don't want to find out like that, hey, you pay taxes on profits? You know, you got to be proactive. You're not going to blow all your profits, and then the tax man comes and you're like, what? Yeah. I couldn't have bought this fifth Bentley. By the way, I don't drive any Bentleys. You got to be proactive. So YouTube was no different. We just had to kind of like understand the rules of engagement because we chose to build our farm, our house on their farm. And that's just, there's a risk.
So in the book, and you just mentioned that you're with your daughters, you're in line waiting for Santa Claus, and that's when you got the news. Like, so I want to like transition a little bit to that, like that personal side.
Yep.
Like, what would, as a founder, as an entrepreneur, as a seasoned business,
you know,
what
it's
was going
hard.
through your head?
You know, one of the things I believe in that I myself challenge with is balance, and balance means a lot of different things. Balance is work life. It's, you know, it's a weekend. Why am I even checking my phone? Now, granted, at that moment, my phone's going off. Our fans, everybody's emailing us. I'm like, this can't make sense. You know, and as I said, one of the reasons I wrote the book was 10 years. It was kind of, I'd written a couple books in a span of a couple of years, and then I didn't. There was an element of kind of like just therapeutic, just kind of like getting a bit of like taking a step back and looking. I was on vacation in Greece. You know, I was sitting on the beach, drinking, eating great food, but I had spare time. I write fast, so I pumped out a book, like 300-page book in a 3-week vacation. But I won't lie, it was also because our long-term plans are to move into other forms of programming, original and scripted. I viewed our story possibly because of all the obstacles, all the dead ends we hit, being in debt, practically insolvent. I joked that I was looking for refrigerator boxes in back alleys as my future residence for a while. There was this idea that, you know what, if you were to fictionalize our story and adapt it into like a screenplay, that book could be a source material for a possible movie feature like The Founder, like The Wolf of Wall Street. I'm far more boring than the Wolf of Wall Street fella, but that was kind of why I went with that story, which I'm going to get to in a second, because everybody was like, you got to add a bit more personal stuff. And I felt like that's a great moment when you're with your kid. You know, she's at the time 10, no, what am I saying 10? She's 5 years old. This was 5 years ago. Wow. She's waiting to go see Santa Claus, and there's a long lineup, and you're like, you know, that's your livelihood and that's your business. As much as you want to say, like, I'll deal with it tomorrow, you can't. And so I said, I've always believed a lot about in balance. You know, in Chinese philosophy, there's the concept of the yin yang, which is all about balance. And, you know, the idea is you may not have equilibrium at every moment in your life, but if you don't have some kind of balance, you die, and that applies to health, body, mind, soul. It applies to work life. Like my wife and I started the company with a couple of other guys. We work together and it's a great rapport. But that's also the thing. If I work, 18-hour days for 10 years and I come home and I'm angry and stressed and I don't spend time with my wife, well, your business's success may come at the expense of your personal relationship success. So the reason why we started with that was because that's something that I've struggled with a lot. I mean, I like to think I'm a great husband, I'm a great father and all that. Definitely not perfect. But I do always say that we are the lucky ones. We're very fortunate. Like, we've won the lottery by living in North America, for one. The fact that, we have these problems, quotation marks, as entrepreneurs is literally first world problems. I think as human beings, we want to be doing things that we enjoy. We want to feel like we're somewhat in control of our destiny. And that's the irony. As much as that day when YouTube took us down, I felt like I was powerless, but I still felt, no, I have a business. And it's like, I so many sports analogies. I'm like, we gave up like 3 goals in the second period, but it's like we're still up 4-3, or if we're down 3-2. It's not 8-0, and I'm like, oh my God, what are we going to do, right? So I think that's kind of the theme. It's to say, at the end of the day, it's more important for me to convince my daughter that let's go home because daddy has to take care of a problem, because today is Sunday, tomorrow Monday, I'll deal with YouTube and I'll address that, So it's kind of was like just reminding that, like, to see the forest through the trees, so to speak.
The interesting thing with YouTube is there's kind of like this whole fantasy dream of like being a YouTube star, but there's a great opportunity there too. So I think if you can speak to the listeners about just any advice for someone that's looking to go that route.
Okay. So this may not be what they want to hear, but if they still believe in themselves and still want to do it, it's like the best thing they could hear. First of all, no such thing as an overnight success. You're not going to do this. You may be lucky, but even the worst thing is if you have a hit, you need to have something recurring and sustainable. The worst thing is to have a hit early on, because then you think it's easy, you get lazy. But it is a very long-term commitment. 2, you have to ask yourself, am I willing to do this for free in my spare time and make a lot of sacrifices over a considerable amount of time? If the answer is no, don't do it. Maybe the timing's not right. Maybe you'll go do other stuff, and then in 5-10 years it's right. 3, everything in life boils down to demand and supply, right? Like, Actually, let's go back to sacrifices first, and then we'll go demand supply. I think I'm like a very good, this is a bit arrogant maybe, but I'm like a very good soccer player. Like, I'm a fantastic striker because I feel the striker is the culmination of the players behind him. So if you got amazing dribblers, amazing passers, it's a big net, right? So I score a lot of goals. But I don't kid myself. I would have never played for any national club or any like pro club because I was not willing to make those sacrifices, go to practice. And in America, there's so many kids that give up their lives playing football, basketball, baseball. In Canada, kids have no lives playing hockey. And I go props because it's much harder to make it for that. So this is the kind of thing, it's very similar. Why? Because in Canada, everybody wants to be, and that's the demand and supply. In Canada, everybody dreams of scoring that Stanley Cup winning goal, or Canada wins the cup. Canada wins the gold. Here, how many kids grow up saying, I want to play in Super Bowl Sunday? I want to play in the World Series. I'm going to be the best basketball player. There are so many people waiting to steal your lunch, so to speak, that unless you're willing to make that sacrifice, after however times you get cut, however times, that a coach says you're not good enough. Now, here's where it gets exciting. You don't have to necessarily please a coach. You don't have to suck up to a teacher that's going to give you that letter of reference to get into a school. The beautiful thing about it, and this is where I get goosebumps, is you can, look, there's a lot of luck and timing. A lot of the biggest YouTubers, it's because a bigger YouTuber early on gave them a spotlight. That is definitely, like if you think of Phil DeFranco, who's a pretty popular YouTuber, he was probably spotlighted by, some bigger YouTuber before him, et cetera, et cetera. But you can basically, through hard work, persistence, and persistence is key, without persistence is the number one thing in anything. But you can actually, over time, through creativity, through hard work, through, just persistence, break through. But it's not something that is done overnight because there are millions of people that are fighting for the same watch time, mind share.
Yeah.
My daughters right now in 2018 are 9 and 7. And if you were to, I mean, they're not in high school yet, but if you were to ask kids their age or kids who are teenagers, if you said, what do you want to do when you grow up? YouTuber is probably number one. Above cop, lawyer, doctor, dentist, athlete. They want to be YouTubers because to them, they just see, this is great, So, it's a great platform that's not going to go away. And I feel like there's been this tide where, yes, the celebrities are these, sort of people who are online on various platforms. But if you think it's like easy and, I could do it, that's like saying you could be Michael Jordan, you could be Tom Brady, I could be Wayne Gretzky. Maybe, unlikely.
That's interesting to say because I feel like you could pull out YouTube and that's any entrepreneurial venture that anybody would want to take.
Absolutely, but the difference is, here's where it's, I think, fundamentally different. With YouTube, you do also need a lot more thick skin. Like, I was turned down by 100 venture capitalists, give or take. Like, it could have been 82, it could have been 150, but it wasn't 20. It was a lot, and it wasn't like I turned down by 1,000. And to be fair, Tony Robbins says, we believe the stories we say, and I said, nobody ever offered me, and that's not true. I did have a few VCs where like, here's a term sheet, here's an offer, but they were crappy offers, so I walked away. But by and large, people turned me down. But I was kind of like, okay, I respect this guy, he's smart, he's accomplished, but he doesn't really get video or content. He's like a software guy. Obviously, he's not going to get it. You need a thick skin to continue. But on YouTube's, it's amplified and exacerbated by the fact that everybody is a beep, beep, or beep. It's like they're not just insulting you, they're insulting 4, generations up your family tree and 4 generations in the future down your family tree. And so, when we are like a brand, we're not a personality-driven channel. And part of the reason was I wanted to build something that if I said, I'm burnt out, I'm going to go sit on a beach in Miami, the company can still go on. And I'm not saying I would have even succeeded, that I would have been like a commanding enough presence for people to tune in. But the problem and the challenge with YouTube is like you do get people coming out and on a public forum bashing you and this and that. And you kind of need a thick skin. And I remember early on when I'd go to these conferences, a lot of YouTube celebrities were shocked that I would read the comment section early on and even reply. But I was like, well, no, it's good feedback. Even if they say you guys suck, you put Batman ahead of Superman, life goes on. I'm not going to go cry about it.
Yeah.
But if these guys were like, I did a vlog about my job and why I quit, and they called me a fat this and a stupid that, I cried all weekend, then it's a bit harder. So yes, it's very similar to entrepreneurship, wanting to be an athlete, wanting to be a singer, but it is, the internet in general is just that much more of a mean place.
Well, this has been an amazing conversation. I feel like I could talk to you all night, but
I could probably speak all night, so it's all good.
but you have a party to get to, right?
Yes, in 20 minutes I have something else.
Awesome.
Right across the hall, so it's perfect.
Well, happy birthday.
Thank you. That's Monday. Thank you very much.
And for people that are just discovering WatchMojo for the first time through you, like how can they
the best bet where we drive the most amount of engagement and share with the community is on YouTube. So youtube.com/WatchMojo is where it's at. If you are Spanish speaking and you want your little sibling who doesn't speak English, for example, to check it out, we got WatchMojo Espanol. We have WatchMojo Francais, WatchMojo German. We got a number of channels. We also launched Miss Mojo because we had a huge subset of our community that wanted a lot of videos that we were never going to get around to doing on WatchMojo, where it's a predominantly male. They like gaming. They like certain things. Like if you're watching top 10 Megadeth songs, top 10 Game of Thrones, death scenes, all of a sudden top 10 One Direction comes along. There's going to be like war in the comments section. So we wanted kind of a positive community vibe. So we launched Miss Mojo a couple of years ago, and that's doing really well. We also launched Junior Mojo. As our audience got older, they had nephews and nieces and kids themselves. So Junior Mojo is, again, a safe, programming for kids. Basically, we're starting to launch a lot more channels. We launched Mojo Plays. I myself am starting to do the opposite, starting to interview newsmakers ourselves. We have, Context is King, a regular video that we publish on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, et cetera, et cetera. But just search WatchMojo. We're not that hard to find.
There you go. Ashkan, man.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for being here. It was a pleasure speaking.
My pleasure.
For more episodes, visit innovationcity.co. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. And if you're in Miami, visit us on Thursday nights. Details are at venturecafemiami.org. And be sure to connect with us on social at We Are Slam and at Venture Cafe MIA. Thanks for listening.
This is where it all begins, so say goodbye to all your fears, all your doubts. This is where they die. This is where we come to win.